Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Wild Hearts at Work podcast. I am your host, Melissa Boggs, and our topic for this week is self management in consulting. And my guest today is someone who has had experience in this, and I would even say is sort of frontiering it. This is David Hawks with Agile Velocity. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
So, tell everyone listening just a little bit about you and a little bit about your organization to kind of set us up to talk about it.
All right. So, as you stated, founded Agile Velocity 12 years ago, and been on kind of the journey of building an organization that we started out as we're based in Austin, Texas, and we started out just providing services to anybody that wanted something around technical stuff. We learned that Agile really was our main differentiator, training and coaching. But over the last 7 years, we've gotten really mostly focused around the transformation space, Agile transformation space, and helping people through that. Along the way, we've grown from me to 20, 30 folks. And then we'll talk, I'm guessing, a little bit about disruption that happened about 2 years ago, and kind of forced us to go back to our core DNA, and then what kind of sprouted out of that. We call it AV 2.0. So while, yes, I do a lot of coaching, training, consulting, really, I would say my pursuit was in building a business and leading a business and growing that and sustaining it. And so I think it was a couple of years ago when I realized, okay, I've achieved my bucket list item, and now what, right? Like 10 years in, I was like, okay, I did it. What do I want to do now with myself? So, and so we'll talk a little bit about that journey.
Indeed. So, full transparency for our listeners, David has been a friend of mine for many, many years. So, I've actually gotten to see at least the second half of this journey. I've gotten to see David as a leader, especially through the pandemic. It's also important to note when we're talking about bucket list items that at least pre-pandemic, David was a triathlon runner, which is not something I can say. So, yeah, he's set out to achieve goals and just checks them right off the bucket list.
Yeah. I'm trying to find that the triathlete form, or at least the running form, back again. But I'm on pace. I'm making progress this year. So
it's hard post-pandemic, man. Like
Yeah.
just figuring out who we are anymore. But
Mhm.
so you talked a little bit about the beginnings of AV, but can you give us just paint a picture of what the structure, the culture, just sort of what AV looked like? We'll just say pre-pandemic, because I think it's really important to contrast that to what it looks like now.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's certain things that are true pre and post, right? Like I would one interesting thing looking back at the 12 years, the last 10 years, our core values have not changed. We haven't deviated from them, and we continue to every once in a while like look and say, hey, are those really our values? Are we really living those things? We're actually doing an exercise even right now as we're now maybe hitting a new growth level. And so that's one thing that's actually kind of proud about, because those were things that at one time I just wrote down. They were more, hey, here's what I would want in an organization. And this is, you're building an organization, you get to say, hey, this is the type of organization I want to work for. Part of that pursuit was also, I wanted to start a company, partly because it was just kind of that bucket list, because my dad started a company when I was in middle school as a consultant, consulting company. I just grew up in that. That was just always what I planned to do. And so that pursuit, but part of it was also, I just didn't want to work for anybody else again, right? Like we've all had, most of our experience working for like leaders or bigger organizations. It's like, all right, I could have done that I would have done that different. I don't know, better
Mhm.
is maybe too rash, but like I would have done that different. And so that was a pursuit, but that also translated to the type of company I wanted to create, which was I didn't want anybody else feeling like they were working for somebody else either, right? But as we grew, we kind of succumbed to normal hierarchical kind of structures, right? Like, okay, well, then you hire a VP to go run that thing, and you hire a VP to run that thing. How do you scale so that once you get past 10 people or past $3 million of revenue, you can't be in all the things. And so to get to 3 million, you start to build the internal non-billable people, but then after 3 million to 5 million is where you need to start hiring leaders, right? People that can take things, run with things, and have the initiative around it. In doing that, that also started to create a pressure that I felt as like these high-end people, start making executive hires. Executives are coming in and expecting some kind of exit type of monetary thing, right? Like they're making an investment. They're at that point in their career where, okay, is that I get ownership? Well, what does that mean in a services company unless you're selling or doing something like that? So then there was sometimes even pressure. I remember we hired one VP, and in the first all hands, he told the organization that I told him that we were building something to sell. And that was the first time the organization had heard it. And that was disruptive.
Oh.
That was a fun day. And the actual conversation was, yeah, that's a possibility. It's always a possibility, right? But it wasn't necessarily like the intent. And it did become an intent at one point, and now it's no longer an intent because of what we did with COVID. So we were, just normal kind of not lots of structure, like maybe one level of management between me and people, normal kind of salary. We did for a number of years. I'd send people the Dan Pink Drive, video and say, in there, he says, you got to pay people enough to take money off the table. So I would say, all right, so what's paying you enough to take money off the table? We were pretty transparent with salaries. So the notion of, hey, if other people know what I'm making, if somebody's embarrassed by that, then we have a problem, right? You're embarrassed
Mhm.
it's too high or low. Like those were some of the philosophy things that we had going into it. And it was kind of like, we're just going to pay people flat salaries so that we're not worrying about money. But that led to some other challenges that I think we're going to get into. So,
Indeed.
mhm.
So yeah, relatively normal, traditional consulting company at that point
Mhm.
is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Which again, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's common based on our conditioning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To imagine that that's the only way to solve those problems. Um, but if you were a normal traditional consulting company, you might not be here on my show.
Right.
So something changed, something happened. Talk to me about 2020.
Yeah. And actually, something that's interesting is in 2019, I actually stepped out of the CEO role, right? Like there was, but like I think it's irrelevant for this, is that the company had started to grow, and the tensions I felt in the company again to like build something bigger to sell so that the executive team could monetize from that. And in my wanting to fulfill their needs, right, was like, okay, so that's what this set of people need organizationally. But then what I realized is I didn't really want to lead that company like that. That I didn't want to be the CEO of that company, because in that hierarchy, I felt the pressure of everything. Like, some of us like to draw the hierarchy upside down, right? But that means everybody's weight is on your shoulders, right?
Mhm.
And I was feeling that weight, and I was taking pretty hard and pretty personal every time somebody would leave that we were failing, right? Like that was
Mm.
the organization was failing in some way, and my job is to build an organization that thrives, right? And thrives for the people, not just thrives from a financial perspective. And And so I was, pretty, I guess, if I think back, like pretty beat up at that point, and like, all right, here's the best place I could go to add value is go work with our largest client, who was Southwest Airlines at the time. And I'm just going to go basically bury my head in that and let that executive team kind of take things from there. And then COVID hit, right? And that was about 9 months later. And at that point, I had to put my owner hat on, right? Not my CEO hat, but my owner hat on to go, okay, because our largest client was Southwest Airlines. Everybody can imagine what happened at that point to them. Not for sake of them not wanting to continue to work with us, but they had to do things that they needed to do, and so all of a sudden we went, when we knew we had a lot of eggs in one basket, and we felt the brunt of that. And so we had to make hard decisions. But I mean, for me as an owner, it was like anywhere from, hey, it was a good run, there's money in the bank, let's take the money and like, celebrate what 10 years of, we built a company, it was a sustainable business, and most people don't make it that far. But for me, it was like, but I'm not ready to retire. So I still want an organization. What do I want out of an organization? And I sat down and kind of put that list together. And what I realized is what I wanted out of an organization is something that we started with, but kind of got away from.
Wow.
And so it allowed me, we call it AV 2.0 internally, as like, it allowed us to redesign and reboot into kind of a new OS, if you will, like, all right, we're going to work in a different way. And for me, I said, all right, if I'm going to lead an organization like this, then I don't want all the weight of the world on my shoulders. That doesn't scale. We need a structure that scales. And that's when we said, all right, no bosses, no hierarchy, nobody reports to anybody. We need to figure out how to create a self-managing organization. And it was basically, for me, it was like, either we can make that work or we go back to, option Z, which is like, okay, it was a good run, right? Like, I wasn't interested in trying to rebuild the hierarchy, build something big to sell. The thought of having like 50 or 100 people and running that organization just in a traditional way just sounds exhausting to me, right? So that's why, and we'll get into probably more of the details, but like, that's why we kind of hit that reboot and started to try and figure out how do we create a self-managing organization, and live what we kind of preach, is like, from an agile leadership, agile values perspective. And that's when we started pursuing that, almost 2 years today. I think it was, April 1st, no joke, was the date that we had like our, most of our team was all of a sudden on the bench. And so we said, okay, let's just all get together for 3 days and like figure this out. So
that is one of the things I was going to ask you. How much of it did you design versus co-creating with everyone at the org?
Yeah, I mean, what I put together was more visionary, with the couples structures. And like, it's like, all right, we started reading, all right, I've heard about holacracy now, how's that really work? What sociocracy, what the hell is that, right? And so I remember there was a week where we're like, okay, we're gonna do sociocracy. And then we realized, as we started to try and bake that okay, that's not exactly what we want to do. But what we do know really well is this concept called agile teams, right?
Ooh, you can hear the peanut gallery, right?
Yeah. So like, all right. And again, we had a lot of people on the bench, and we had to shrink our team a little bit. We ended up coming out of that with, like, we had 12 people. So we formed 2 cross-functional teams for the first time as an organization. And when I mean cross-functional, I mean, we had our billable folks along with operations and sales and marketing all across 2 different teams. We built a backlog and we started working from that.
Wait,
And
hold on. Are you telling me that you didn't have departments?
we didn't, but what we did learn is that, so we were down to one marketing person, right? And so one of the things that started to evolve from that is going, well, we can't, it's unfair for us. And our marketing person is in the first 5 to 10 years of her career, to say, all right, all marketing responsibility and strategy is on your shoulders, right? While we want to have autonomy, right? But what I would say, it's team autonomy or shared autonomy, right? Like nobody's off on an island. Nobody's like, I'm the only one that makes these decisions. You're the only one that makes these decisions. So we actually, kind of borrowed from the circles concept from Holacracy, but we didn't fully implement it. But what we did, we ended up calling them gangs. And it was like, all right, we're going to form, anybody can spontaneously create a gang for any initiative or any strategic thing that needs guidance. And so we formed a marketing gang, and anybody could subscribe to, hey, I want to be a part of influencing the marketing strategy of the organization, along with the person that hopefully the marketing person also wants to be part of the marketing gang. And they came, and that group came together and talked about what are the big decisions we need to make and what do we need to do and what are our priorities. Now, most of the work might go back to that marketing person to do, but then that person had this kind of support circle around making those decisions, looking at KPIs, looking at those types of things. And so like a marketing gang, a sales gang, a training gang, people ops was also another one that surfaced of like, all right, how do we handle kind of like performance and other things across the organization? Now, we also implemented, direct feedback and like, all right, first line of defense is you got a problem, you need to go talk to somebody. You can't go just to their boss because there is none. So you got to go, talk, and teaching everybody the redirect. Somebody comes bitching to you, you got to say, okay, that's nice. Have you talked to that person? Do you need me to come help you talk to that person? Right. Like we started to create new skills, new muscles organizationally to be able to do that.
I think that's one of the things that people miss when they're talking about self-management or self-organization is I'm a big believer that if you take anything away from humans, you have to replace it with something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're taking away the boss or the manager, then you have to replace it with these skills to replace that structure in people's brains and in the organization itself. And I think that shows up really well in what you just said.
Skills and other structures, right? So there's still structures. It's just a potentially different structure, right? So everybody is on an agile like home team, right? And that home team is responsible for more of that accountability circle, if you will, like accountability to, is everybody living the values? Accountability to, are we paying attention to each other's health? Are we the accountability of, hey, Melissa, you've got way too much on your plate. Why, right? Why do you keep doing that to yourself? Like we definitely have a group of people that like to, I'll do it. And then, but who's paying attention to that to each other? And so some of that becomes a structural piece, and it's definitely been an evolution. In no way we had it figured out 2 years ago. I think we, and then our delivery team was a team. We did the cross-functional teams, and we got busy again. Then we actually built, we back to kind of like non-delivery teams and delivery teams just because of organizing around some of the work. We're currently going through another evolution of that, but constant evolution of how do we keep doing it. My pursuit this last year has been eliminate anything that still requires David as a decision maker, right? So one of those that appeared in December, I think it was, we started, we were starting hiring at a pretty fast clip again, for an expanding from a coaching team. And it still was kind of, we've always had a process of involving as many people in the interview process, doing a fist of 5 at the end of it. What everybody can provide input into the decision, but used to be prior, the hiring decision was the hiring manager, right? Like, all right, thanks for all your input, and I'm going to go make a decision, and hopefully they're, most of the time they're aligning with the decision of the group, but sometimes there's debate and somebody's a 2 and somebody's a 4, and all right, what are we going to do? And so fast forward after COVID, we were still doing the fist of 5. Sometimes we were finding those discussions were taking too long, because now all of a sudden, it wasn't as bad when we had 12 people, but when we had 20 people to make a decision, as many of y'all know, that we may never get to a decision, right? Like, with 20 people. And so some of those sessions were just like, all right, we're all getting frustrated because we're just talking in circles and we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting to a decision. So whose decision is it? Right. And if it's easy, if everybody's 4s and 5s, we all made a decision together. But when it's a decision that's not as clear, whose decision is it? And one of the people on the team said, well, why don't we make it the team that they're going to is the hiring team, and it's their decision. So we basically said the hiring manager responsibility is the hiring team. And because ultimately it was happening that it was just turning into David's decision before that, right? Like if it wasn't clear. And so I was like, all right, let's talk about now back to new skill. Has everybody hired somebody before? Do they understand what that process is about? Does they understand the responsibility that brings, right? Just because you like somebody doesn't mean we should hire them. And so we had to talk about the responsibilities and the things that we need to think about when we're hiring, right? And so that became a new thing that we developed, and that's how we've been hiring people since December.
So I imagine if you don't have hierarchy and you kind of approach the work in a different way, that perhaps your salary bands, if you will, don't look the same as a typical consulting company.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, I've heard of different things in like a structure. I remember talking to somebody once where they salaries were voted on by the organization, right? Like we didn't go there. That would scare me. Just the most popular person gets a raise. So what but we made a comp change for a different reason. It just happened to be at the same time. It was part of that. What is the company that we want to build? And part of that for me was in the traditional structure, I only had room for one VP of delivery, like one VP of coaching, right? And one VP of services. And so I could pay that person a significant amount. But the reality of the work we do, high-end, agile transformation management consulting, everybody that we're hiring is in, the last part of their careers, right? Like they're all very experienced, all been leaders somewhere, and so therefore, and, high earners in that way. We also are in an industry where a lot of people can those people that are the best in our business could just stay independent and find enough work and make a lot of money doing that, frankly. So the issue we were having when we were trying to hire in that hierarchy is that then you've got, all right, I could pay this person a lot to lead, but then I'm trying to hire somebody that has the potential to do that role, but I can't have the whole team be VPs, in that structure. So then we were kind of constrained by, well, this is the salary band of, you could say a director, but somebody who's the senior contributor. And And we weren't able to attract the top talent in our industry. And we pride ourselves on being one of the best agile transformation organizations. Again, not the biggest. We don't want to be the biggest, but we want to be like, we want to do great work. We want to attract great clients. So that's what we're after. And we weren't, I mean, we had good people, but there's people that I would try and recruit that I just couldn't recruit because they're like, I can make 50% more just staying independent, right? I love the idea. I want to join a team, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And so we changed the model to be more variable, to be based on kind of like from revenue, or margin perspective, and therefore that aligned and created the ability for people to make as much as they were making as an independent, but also be part of a tribe, right? So like, we're never going to attract, or nor do we want to attract the lone wolf, right? The person that is happy being alone. Don't join us, right? But we want the people who do great work, but also want to be a part of a team, want to collaborate, want to learn from each other, want to have the support systems of, hey, I have an ops team and a sales team, and they're going to deal with all that stuff, so I don't have to deal with that, and I can just focus on doing great work, and I don't have to spend the weekend doing invoicing and dealing with insurance and dealing with all those other things. I got a whole team for that, right? And that was one of those things I put on my list of what do I want if I was in an organization, right? So what it allowed me to do is say I needed to hire more me's from a transformation coaching perspective. Otherwise, I was having to be, and back to that, all the weights on my shoulders. Otherwise, I was having to lead or be involved in all of the engagements, right, and everything that we were kind of doing. So it's definitely allowed us to scale in that way, to have more, again, self-managing organization, hired high-end people that can go lead engagements, who can run those engagements, but also are collaborating and also are being compensated from a market perspective that they could make, potentially on their own.
So just to clarify, the coaches that join you, they're not paid on an hourly basis. They're not even paid on a time and material. I mean, it's not your traditional way of paying them. You're kind of paying them more like a partner in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's also one other change that didn't happen immediately with COVID, but happened by the time we started kind of building our book of business back up, which is we drastically changed how we bill our clients. And so that those two together changed. So instead of, before we would have done your normal daily bill rate or hourly bill rate. And what we found with that was that there was just a couple problems. One, you sell a bucket of hours. A client doesn't really know what they get, right? It's like, yep, I'm going to show up, I'm going to bill you. And it also became more complicated when we're all virtual, because we're not a captive on-site person, right? Like when we're captive on-site, I'm here Monday through Thursday, I'm going to bill you 4 days because you got me. However you use me, I'm going to bill you. If you don't do it, if you don't use my time effectively, shame on you. You're still paying me the same amount, right? So we changed all that to say, all right, what we're going to do is be really clear. Now, there's something we haven't mentioned. We've developed over the last 7 years something called Path to Agility, which is our transformation model. And because of that, that's allowed us to get clear about what are the activities, what's the value that we're providing in a consistent way, so that we could start to define all our services as deliverables, value-based deliverables. We're here to help you create a compelling purpose for change. That has this price tag. We're going to help you build a transformation team to guide your transformation and help them build a backlog. That has this price. We're going to coach your teams. We're going to help you launch a safe art, whatever those things are. we've got really clear about what those deliverables are. And now our customers have better clarity about what they're buying. And then we've got better clarity about what we're selling, right? Versus, I would say pre all this, it was hire a smart coach, send them out to do smart things, right? Like, hope that they do smart things, right? But we didn't really have any way of saying, are we being consistent, right? Everybody's just kind of off doing smart things. And so this has allowed us to be more consistent and therefore more effective, because each coach is contributing to improving that deliverable or that playbook behind the deliverable, which then is allowing us to, deliver a better product every time. And so that combination of those two things has changed it from just paying people a percentage of a daily rate to, hey, you're paid based on the value that you're providing to a client.
Which is incredible. I mean, you used the word product just now, and I think that's what's so unique about your model is that you've found a way to almost productize services,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's very tangible. They know what the outcome is, as the coach and as the client, but it's very, there's another word besides tangible. Like I can touch it, like I can feel it and I can see it and look at it.
Well,
Um,
it's more concrete in terms of what we're offering. And we wouldn't have been able to do that 7 years ago, right? Like all of us that have been in the space for the last 10 years, those agile adoption patterns, it's like I tell, people all the time, like every client is different, but every client is the same, right? Everybody's struggling with the same types of problems. The solutions are actually pretty similar. The people dynamics are always unique, right? But the structural things are actually pretty consistent. And by us mapping that out in the path to agility capability model, we started to see it, right? Like that's what allowed us to be able to see, okay, these are the patterns. We've now been able to map that out in a way that then we could build services around that to be in a consistent way, right? It's not agile transformation is not an emerging market.
that's true.
Now business agility and organizational agility and some things in that, at that level. But if most of our clients are still technology transformation, there's a lot of repeating patterns, and then some of those patterns repeat for agile marketing or business agility, as well.
So I'm curious, you talked earlier about walking the talk. As you were going through your own transformation, because that's essentially what this was, did some of those patterns show up to you and to the team? Did you say, oh, we're experiencing the same thing that we help our clients through?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, going through an align stage to getting to a learning stage to getting to more predictable and faster and then more responsive. And there definitely was the aspect of align, like I said, April 1st of 2020, aligning around what is this new vision? What is AV 2.0? David, what are all these words you're saying? Right? The people, because you got 11 other people who are going, all right, I know what the structure was before, and I'm not sure what this new and how, like you said, like structure, you're clear about the structures that are going away, but so the most important thing was, are we aligned around why we're making the changes that we're making, right? Some of it was easy to focus, right? Like, all right, our world just got turned upside down. We lost our largest client. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen in this market. Everything's virtual now. We're not traveling, like all these things. So I would say for the first 3 months, things were pretty laser focused on, all right, what we're trying to do organizationally. And then as we started to come out of that and we started to grow again is when we started to go, okay, now what? Like I could feel by the end of Q3, I could feel this tension in the organization that was like, all right, what's the vision now? Right. Like, cause it was it was like survival for 2 quarters, right? Like, and then, okay, now, all right, oh, we survived, we're making money again, right? Like, what's the vision now, right? Like, so then there was some things that came out that we're still using in terms of talking about our strategy and who we are and our identity, that kind of came out in that time frame. But yeah, aligning around the problem and then going through this, we got to get the structures in place where we're able to learn and get past the point of something's not working, I got to escalate to David because David's the orchestrator of what we're trying to be, right? Like in that, and the old muscle memory is, all right, if there's a problem, it escalates to the CEO and CEO deals with it, right? So I mean, that probably took a year of going through, starting to build this culture of, all right, it doesn't need to come to me, right? There's other structures that can handle that. And so that's, I don't know when that date was, but there was just kind of a point where it's like, oh, you know what? The organization's kind of running itself. I mean, tactically, the organization had run itself for years, but strategically, every quarter we go into our quarterly planning and we form a strategy gang for preparing for that, right? And anybody can be on it, and sometimes I'm not on it, right? Like and that was a test, right? Like that quarter was actually a test of like, all right, what if I don't go to the strategy gang, and what are they going to do? What are they going to come up with, and what are we going to plan, right? And but sometimes as leaders, we got to create space for other people to step into, right?
Yeah. So on that note, as leaders, my last couple of questions are just about you specifically, because this feels like it was really incredible, but also probably pretty stressful. What was the easiest thing for you personally throughout this process, throughout this journey? Whether it was like the easiest thing to let go of, the easiest thing to implement?
What was really, and it wasn't lost on me in the moment, but what was weird was when all this, COVID stuff was going down, I was actually really energized. And it was really, and I was like, everybody is freaking out. Everybody is like in the world, but like in our company, like everybody is freaking out. Everybody is not sure what's happening. Everybody, like, just that chaos was happening. And the thing I could turn back to is like when I did Strength Finders, one of my things was like restorative, right? Like, there's a problem, it needs fixing, I'm ready. I was actually like really like, oh, and I think I was energized because I think more subconsciously at the time recognized that the company had gone a direction that I wasn't as excited about. I didn't mind being an owner of that growth company, but I didn't want to be the leader of that growth company, or even necessarily be, not necessarily leader, be CEO, but just like be a leader in that company. And again, and so I think part of the energizing was like, oh, I have an opportunity to like reset, right? Like, which when I stepped out of the CEO role, I didn't feel like I had that opportunity, right? Like, I did, but like, I didn't, right? Like that. Sometimes we need a crisis to create the urgency around that. So I would say like changing to, like, I'm always, people, I know I can make people exhausted because I'm always trying to improve the system. I'm never happy with, there's never a status quo in my world, right? Like, it's always, okay, now what are we going to tweak? Now what are we going to improve, right? And I've had to recognize that, okay, I can't just be on that gas pedal all the time organizationally because I wear people out. But this was an opportunity for me to hit the gas pedal on that. And so I would say rolling out this new way of working was actually easy mentally for me, not easy in terms of lots of things to figure out, but that actually was energizing, right? I like a puzzle. So it was just a puzzle, and it was just like, all right, we got to go figure this out. And I
Sounds
guess
like the
I ended up being
decision.
the calm in the, kind of storm.
Yeah. Sounds like the decision to do it was the easiest thing. Like
Yeah.
it was very evident, obvious that this was the right thing to do,
Hmm.
not just for you, but for the company and ultimately for your clients, even if
Yeah.
that took a while to see. What
Yeah.
was the hardest?
Hmm. um, let's see. I don't know if that's over, right? Like I think it, it's never done, right? And we're continuing to evolve. I don't know if that's hard per se. I mean, it it can be frustrating. Like there's also a perfectionist side of me. So there's a side of like, all right, can't we just have that already? Right. Like, like there's certain things that um we just continue to not achieve organizationally and that may be the toughest. I mean, the goes without saying. I mean, we lost 10 people at the time of COVID hit, right? Like, that that's never a fun, decision at all. But that there weren't a whole lot of options, right? Like that
Sure.
one, it was tough mentally, but it was also just kind of like, all right, we're gonna this company will not survive at the spend that we were going, right? So
Yeah.
um,
So the easiest thing was the decision to do it. And the hardest thing is maybe uh, letting go of a little bit of that perfectionism. Um, and then, yeah, like you said, it's
oh, I'm
always
supposed to let that
difficult.
go.
Oh,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
um, and normally I would ask someone if there's anything that you would do different. But I actually think because of the way that you work, that if there's a chance for you to do something different, you could make that change every couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if the thing that I would have loved to have been able to do, and I don't know that we would have ever achieved it, even if we knew where we were headed, is, yeah, like I was calm in the sense that we're gonna figure it out. I'm always kind of like, we'll figure it out. Like I'm not real worried, but that first quarter, everybody was kind of just in panic of like, we need revenue, like, and I was like, look, we're not gonna get revenue in Q2, right? Like it's just not gonna happen. Nobody's buying. Everybody, like Q2 of 2020, everybody's frozen. Nobody's happening. Our goal is the hope that in July the phone starts ringing again. And our hope is that by the end of Q3, um, we've sold something, right? And that ended up happening. That ended up coming true. But for Q2, everybody was just in panic. And I wish if I wish I would have been able to give everybody faith so that we could have worked more strategically. Like there's things we could have just poured in a path to agility in those 3 months and made huge progress. But we were scrambling at like, let's put that workshop out there. Let's put this out here. Let's do this thing, hoping that somebody will buy something. And the reality is like nobody was ready to buy, right? And so I wish we could have provided more maybe protection or safety or something to the organization so that um, we could have just stayed more strategic and we would have benefited from that today. We didn't really benefit from most of the activity that we did in that quarter, right? It was kind of all, we did a lot of move everything to virtual. There's definitely things we did that we are leveraging today, but there's definitely some things that were just churn.
I'm sure you were not alone. I know you were not
Right.
alone in
Yeah.
that panic.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we get toward wrapping up, I have two questions that I ask every guest here in season two. The first one is when you heard the name of the podcast, Wild Hearts at Work, what was the first thing you thought of, or how did you relate to that phrase? What does that mean to you?
Um, some of it translates to me to like disruption, like not happy with status quo, not I think that's why I found this career in coaching and agile transformation, is because I am that person that isn't happy with it just staying the way it is. Like, we got to change it, we got to improve it. So to me, like, yeah, Wild Hearts is kind of like, all right, the disruptors at work, the people who are trying to push the envelope, the people that are trying to, do things the newer, better way, or invent a new, better way, right, for the organization.
Love it. It's one of my favorite questions because every week it's something different, and I think all of them apply. So, David, if someone is super intrigued by everything that you've had to say in this episode, how can they find you? What do you have going on? What's next for AV or Path to Agility or any of it?
Yeah. So you can reach me at david@agilevelocity.com or david@pathtoagility.com. If you're a coach and looking to join a team unlike any other and want to be, part of a tribe that's doing great things and pushing the envelope, love to talk to you about that. If you're a leader that's trying to lead a transformation, look at Path to Agility and as a way of that guidance, that kind of capability model around that. That's pathtoagility.com. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to thank you and just say how proud I am to have watched this journey. I feel privileged to kind of be in the front seat. So thank you for being here on the show and for sharing your story, but mostly just thank you for the work that you do. It's so important to really supporting these wild hearts. I mean, the work that you do specifically and your team does gives hope to people that listen to this show. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to you, my listeners, thank you for joining me again this week for another episode of Wild Hearts at Work. Doing this is such a joy because of you, so I really appreciate you continuing to show up time after time. As always, you can like, share, subscribe, tell your grandmother, tell your dog walker about the show, because we are all looking to make a difference in the world of work. Until next time, dear hearts, stay wild.